Peter Dickinson joins us. He's a British journalist who's in the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. Welcome to the programme, Peter. Also with us, Edward Arnold, who's a security expert from Rusi, the Royal United Services Institute. It's a British defence and security organisation. Thanks both for being with us. Peter, first, what is the situation like in Ukraine and in the capital where you are? What's the mood?
The mood is anxious. There is a certain amount of resolution, but certainly anxiety over yesterday's decision by Russia to recognise the so-called separatist republics in East Ukraine. Those territories had long were created by Russia in 2014 and had long been under Kremlin control. So the decision itself doesn't change much immediately on the ground, but it paves the way for what could potentially be a very serious escalation. Putin has come out since then, today, in the last few hours, in fact, and clarified that he recognised those so-called separatist republics within the boundaries of that they claim, which are significantly larger than the territories they currently occupy. So in other words, he's essentially saying that they recognise territories currently held by the Ukrainian military and potentially paving the way for a direct confrontation, potentially in the near future. So this is a course of grave concern for many here in Kyiv and throughout Ukraine. And this has been added to, the mood has been added to by the fact that Putin accompanied his declaration yesterday of recognition with a remarkable, almost 1 hour long diatribe against Ukraine, essentially suggesting that Ukraine is not a legitimate state, that it has no historical legitimacy, and that it is part of Russia and should return to Russian control, and is essentially an enemy of Russia and should be treated as such. So people take these sort of comments very, very seriously here, and in combination with the military threat we're now seeing, of course, the situation is becoming quite grave.
Yes, and Edward, I mean, President Putin has been saying for a long time he doesn't like the thought that Ukraine would like to join NATO. He's worried about that NATO move to the east, and the West has been threatening sanctions for ages. He's still gone ahead and invaded. Is there anything the West can do at this stage?
Sean, you're right. This has been going on for quite some time. Putin has been speaking in these terms like he did last night and today since 2007 in his famous Munich speech, and a couple of speeches and essays thereafter, describing how he sees the fall of the Soviet Union as a catastrophe for Russia, and also wanting to essentially make Russia a great power again. It's very difficult to deal with this at the moment, just because there are fundamental disagreements in the West and Russia on terms of European security. And unless you can go to the heart of those matters, the dialogue or the mechanisms that you might want to use to try and de-escalate don't really matter if there's a very low degree of trust and confidence on both sides.
So you seem to be suggesting that President Putin is he's more concerned with the security than he is about the economy, and that security will always come first. So in effect, will sanctions make any difference to a further expansion in Ukraine?
Again, you're right. Putin's a securocrat. We all know about his KGB roots, and he came up through that way to the Russian presidency. So he does talk in terms of security a lot. That's his view of the world. On the sanctions, yes, again, the West has been threatening sanctions for a long time. And periodically we have had sanctions across, but obviously energy dependency is one measure. Another, just the linkages between the West and Russia are very hard to decouple. What we expect at the moment, though, is that Russia has built up a lot of foreign reserves in the tune of $600 billion to specifically weather these sanctions. And the difficulty is at the moment that our sanctions policy has to be graduated, because you can't do all of the harshest measures at one point, because then you have nothing else left in the bag. So at the moment, I don't think Putin will be looking at this latest round of sanctions and it will be doing much for deterrence.
Yeah. Meantime, Peter, of course, the Ukrainian citizens are stuck in the middle of all this, aren't they? And I wonder what they're thinking, what they want the West to do to try to stop further incursions by Russia.
I think it's very true to say that economic factors are unlikely to be decisive. There is a feeling here that is strengthened by things like Putin's speech last night, his previous essays and comments on Ukraine, that this is a decisive issue for Putin. He's very emotional, he's obsessive about Ukraine, and he will not be deterred by the idea of a recession or even a depression. He sees this in world historical terms and in terms of his own reign and his own place in Russian history. While, of course, people here welcome, in Kyiv, they welcome news of economic sanctions and economic measures. What they really want is to see the West supporting Ukraine, to building up Ukraine's defensive capabilities, to arm Ukraine, and to provide Ukraine with also economic support to allow the country to weather the storm that they're currently facing. Even before any military action begins, the country's already suffered significant economic damage, which is also part of the wider conflict that Ukrainians face. This is not new to them, of course. This has been going on since 2014 to one degree or another, but we are going through an extreme period of escalation, and the fears are now that the only real deterrent for Putin is to have Ukraine strong enough to inflict very serious damage on any invasion force or any military offensives that he may care to launch.
OK, Peter Dickinson, thanks for joining us, and Edward Arnold too. Thank you.